The Atlanta Braves are reportedly interested in trading for Cubs outfielder Cody Bellinger. Does it make sense? Let's break it down next. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Wednesday, November 27th. Your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on Twitter, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and Instagram as well. And you can find all of my written work. BravesToday.com is the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. And this is a mailbag episode, as we talked about earlier this week. This is a bunch of your questions. Couple of them came in about Cody Bellinger. We are going to talk about last night's breaking news of Blake Snell to the Dodgers. But let's start off with the Bellinger thing, okay? Because Atlanta reportedly wants a left-handed hitting outfielder. The Cubs reportedly want to move on from Cody Bellinger because, honestly, contracts with player options are dumb. Mutual options, too. We'll get to that in a minute. And what would this look like for Atlanta, and is this a good fit? We've seen the reporting coming out from the Cubs side of this, that the Braves are interested in Cody Bellinger. I don't necessarily know if that is just something put out there to drum up interest or if that's legitimate. I had a couple Cubs people who cover the Cubs reach out to me and say, have you heard anything? And I said, honestly, we never hear anything until the team announces it. This is as I've said before, this is the front office that leaks the least in all of baseball. They operate in complete silence, and we typically don't hear anything about what's going on until we get that big familiar blue box on Twitter from the Atlanta Braves announcing the deal they've already made. I cannot in any way corroborate this interest, but the fit to me is a little bit odd for a couple reasons. Yes, he's a left-handed hitting outfielder, and we had a whole show yesterday about wanting to find those guys. But there's a few reasons why it doesn't make sense to me. The first one is that the value to Atlanta of Cody Bellinger is significantly less than a bunch of other teams, right? Because what does Cody Bellinger do really well? He is not the slugger that won an MVP in 2019 with 47 home runs. He's not that guy anymore. You know, he hit 18 homers last year, batted .266 in 2023. His resurgent year after he signed with Chicago, he batted .307 with 26 homers, which is super useful. 20 steals. Last year, he came back to earth, 9 steals, 18 homers, batted .266. Cody Bellinger is a useful piece, but what does he do really well? He's an exceptional defender in center field, and he's a very good, if not exceptional, defender at first base. Atlanta has long-term options at both positions. Matt Olson is going to be here for a while. He's not going to play first over Matt Olson, and he's not going to play center field over Michael Harris II. Now, last year in Chicago with Pete Crow Armstrong, who, side note, is one of the better center field defenders that I have seen in person since probably Andrew Jones. I've not seen every good defensive center fielder in person, but I saw Pete Crow Armstrong in person in the minors, and he is one of the better center field defenders I have ever seen. So, in deference to Pete Crow Armstrong, they played Bellinger at first and in right field a lot. He has a grand total in his career of 316 innings in left, but 1,300 in right, 4,000 in center, and 2,500 at first. So, yes, there is a path to you get Cody Bellinger, you put him in right field until Ronald Acuna Jr. comes back, and then when Ronald comes back, somebody has to move, and it's probably out of deference to Ronald, it's going to be Bellinger moving into left field, where his value, an exceptional defender, his value is minimized because left field defense is just not nearly as important as center field or even right field defense, right? I'm not saying Atlanta can't use Blake Snell. I'm saying it feels like there should be other teams who either need an option in center field, need an option at first base, or both that are more willing to take Cody Bellinger and actually give something of value back versus what Atlanta would do to get Cody Bellinger. So, reason one, the fit doesn't make sense to me is because he's less valuable to you than he is to other teams. And so, theoretically, they should give more to get him than Atlanta would. You would be dumping Cody Bellinger in Atlanta. You might actually get something of value from some other team. And if Atlanta takes him, they're probably not taking him without Chicago retaining a significant portion of the salary. The salary is another reason to not really love the fit of Cody Bellinger in Atlanta. He is scheduled, after he declined his opt-out for 2025, he is now scheduled to make $27.5 million in 2025. He has a player option for 2026 at $25 million. If he chooses not to pick up his own player option, you would owe him a $5 million buyout. So if you trade for Cody Bellinger, minus whatever money would be kept by Chicago, which again, Atlanta's going to ask a lot of that to be kept by Chicago, and they're not going to want to do that. The whole reason they're trying to get rid of Bellinger is to free up an outfield spot and to free up some money. You are on the hook for $32.5 million for one season of Cody Bellinger. Or, if he comes back, $27.5 in 2025 and $25 million in 2026. Is it possible that Atlanta trades for Cody Bellinger and then gives him an extension similar to what they did with Chris Sale that lowers his salary to $22 million a year? It is possible, right? Again, nobody on this roster is making more than $22 million in a year. Matt Olson, Austin Riley, Spencer Strider, nobody. Ronald's capping out at $17 million. It's hard to say, hey, Ronald, I know you're getting $17 million. We're going to pay $32.5 to Cody Bellinger to come in and play your right field until you're ready and then move to left. So another reason it doesn't make sense. And my concern with trying to count on, yes, we're going to get that extension to him, if nothing else, just to get rid of the player option, because Atlanta doesn't give player options. They don't do mutual options, which are dumb anyway. They don't do player options. They do club options or nothing. Another reason to be concerned that they might actually get that option or that extension signed is Cody Bellinger's agent, Scott Boras. And Scott Boras negotiated this weird structure because Bellinger wasn't getting the long-term deal that he wanted last offseason in free agency. He is still represented by Boras. It is unlikely that a Boras client would willingly reduce his salary. Atlanta would either need to add another year on the end so that Bellinger was guaranteed and making more money, or just not renegotiate it. And it feels if you're going to go over that $22 million limit, which again, nobody on a multi-year deal under Anthopoulos has done that. The only player that signed for more than $22 million was a one-year deal for Josh Donaldson in 2019. Freddie Freeman was offered more, and he chose to go to LA. Is Cody Bellinger the guy you're going to finally do that for? So it is possible, yes, that Cody Bellinger comes to Atlanta. There's a couple ways this deal could look. Option number one is Atlanta could just take Bellinger, but ask the Cubs to pick up however much money required so that Bellinger's making under $22 million. I don't know how that works with the player option as far as do they have to have him sign something already saying he's not going to opt out or how that would work, but that's option one. Option two, maybe it is possible. Oh yeah, and that deal would be at best for a fringe prospect. Atlanta's not giving up a guy of value for Cody Bellinger. It's just with that contract, it's not happening. The other option is maybe Atlanta tries to make a package deal and says, give us Cody Bellinger and also give us Nico Hoerner. Let's see if Nico Hoerner can come in, and when he's healthy, can he compete for our shortstop job? Now, the issue here is, I mentioned the healthy thing. Nico Hoerner had surgery. And because of having surgery, which was a flexor tendon in his throwing arm, he may or may not be ready to start the season. And so you may be looking at something where you're trying to see if you can integrate Nico Hoerner into the starting lineup in place of Orlando Arcia a month into the year, right? It's another guy who would go on your IL. You do probably have to give a legitimate prospect to do that. So we'll see what happens. It's not, you can see a case to get Cody Bellinger, but it doesn't make nearly as much sense for Atlanta as it does for a bunch of other teams. I think if Juan Soto doesn't go back to the Yankees, that's a slam dunk. They need help at first base. They would need help in center field. Yes, Jazz Chisholm can play center, but they used him a lot in the infield. You put Judge back in right. You have Bellinger who can do both first and center. On days that Bellinger's at first, Jazz Chisholm can play center field. They've got a lot of options there. And it feels like that makes more sense. One, from a money perspective, they'll have the Soto money to spend. And two, from a roster fit, because they legitimately have needs at those positions. And the Cubs can probably get an actual asset back for Cody Bellinger rather than just taking some of the money and dumping him for whatever they can get. While we were all sleeping last night, other kind of breaking news I was asked about this morning was Blake Snell going to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Because of course, right? 5 years, $182 million. There are some deferrals in there. It is not to the extent of Shohei Ohtani, but there are some deferrals in there. He got a $50-something million signing bonus, which is absolutely wild. It is apparently $62 million deferred of the 182, so he'll get 120 over the next couple seasons, and then $62 million is deferred to the future. No, there's not a no trade clause, but he'll get paid $5 million if traded. My initial reaction is, one, holy cow, this rotation, right? Shohei Ohtani, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, if Clayton Kershaw re-signs, Clayton Kershaw, Bobby Miller, Tony Gonsolin, Dustin May, they got a lot of arms. This is probably now, I don't expect them to go after Max Fried. There's been a lot of smoke about Boston wants Max Fried. Lucas Giolito, who went to high school with Max Fried at Harvard Westlake, is on the Red Sox. The two of them sat in a luxury box in Dodger Stadium to watch Jack Flaherty's postseason start for the Dodgers, or World Series start for the Dodgers, because Flaherty also went to that same high school with the two of them at the same time. I understand why fans would be frustrated and mad about this. I think the only real thing that we can realistically be mad about, and I was just going to be unpopular, is the signing bonus aspect. He's getting $50 million in a signing bonus. A lot of teams don't have the liquidity to do that. The Dodgers can do it because they're flush with money from all the new Shohei Ohtani endorsement deals, and they're flush with money from winning the World Series. The broadcast revenues, the merchandise, the postseason gate they just announced was the largest postseason profit pool that's ever existed in MLB history. So they're flush with cash now and can afford to give the signing bonus because they don't have to pay Shohei Ohtani's money yet. And I've seen some folks be a little confused about that. Let me just clarify, make sure everybody knows how this works. Shohei's $68 million deferred money is paid 10 years after the season he earns it. But the way the CBA is structured, you have until the second July 1st after the season he played. So after the 2024 season, you have until July 1st, 2026 to put the present value of that money, which is $46 million, into an account that you do not have access to. It is audited by the Players Association that will pay him in, when it's time to pay that deferred salary. So it's not like they just don't have to pay him anything but $2 million for a decade. They have to spend that money. They just have time before they have to do it, and they've already made more than that off of new Pacific Rim endorsement deals, bigger merchandise sales and ticket sales and the World Series and all of that stuff. Because of the significant deferrals in Shohei's deal, they're able to use the cash they've earned now to pay the signing bonus for Blake Snell. That sucks because not a lot of teams can do that. The Atlanta can't afford to spend $50 on a signing bonus to a dude right now. Just a lot of teams don't have that flexibility, that liquidity to do that. But outside of that, everything else about this deal is something that anybody else could have done. Any team in baseball could have signed Blake Snell for 5 years and $182 million if they wanted to do it. And the real issue in baseball, yes, as a fan of baseball, it sucks to see the Dodgers just become this super team. The real issue in baseball is there are so many teams and ownership groups that are more concerned about making money than they are about putting a winning product on the field that can compete for championships. And there is not a lot that we can do to fix that right now. In just a minute, we're going to get to all of your questions. Ton of questions here about Charlie Morton. Are we giving up on Jared Kelenic? Prospects I like. What's the bigger need? We'll break down all of that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby taking your mailbag questions the day before Thanksgiving here. And reminder, if you have questions for me, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball, Blue Sky as well. Shows on Twitter, Braves_today. You can email us, contact@bravestoday.com. You can leave them in the YouTube comments down below. I've tried to go through all of the different places people can leave questions and collect everything. Didn't write down a ton of names. I apologize if I don't say your name in here, but a whole list of questions. And one of the first ones here is a couple people had this comment on the show yesterday. Why are we giving up on Jared Kelenic? And this was in response to the conversation about the Braves are looking for a left-handed hitting outfielder. We're not giving up on Jared Kelenic. I think what we're doing here is we're trying to hedge our bets. We understand that Jared Kelenic is incredibly talented. They would not have gone out and traded for him last year, took on all the dead money they took on to get him if they did not think he was immensely talented. But we can also acknowledge he is not a finished product. He finished last year with a .231 average, a .679 OPS. He got outplayed down the stretch by Ramon Laureano to the point where he barely played in the last month of the season. And he is going to have an opportunity to be an everyday starter when the season begins. Ronald Acuna Jr. is not going to be ready. You signed one outfielder. He's your other starting outfielder. AA has told us he has a role on this team. He can play all three spots. He's a lefty. He's a lefty. They have wanted a lefty backup center fielder for a while. Jared Kelenic has a role on this team. The question's going to be after, whenever Ronald's ready to come back, maybe it's a month, maybe it's two, whatever. Which of those corner outfielders is playing better and is going to get the bulk of the playing time going forward? Is it going to be Jared Kelenic, or is it going to be some other player, whatever the free agent signing is? Because we saw last year, again, down the stretch with Laureano, he dominated the playing time down the stretch because he was playing better than Kelenic. Kelenic he got 8 starts in the month of September. He got 17 in August. And July, when they had to have him play every day, 24 starts, he batted .137. Now, he was hot in June when he first moved to leadoff, batting .304 in 24 starts. But outside of that, .137 in July, .209 in August, .222 in September, but Laureano batted almost .300. I talked last week on Friday, a little bit of a mirage, but still, Laureano outplayed him and got the playing time. You're going to have that same conversation whenever Ronald comes back. If he's able to play every day, which we don't actually know for the record, if he's able to play every day, which of the two corner outfielders that'll start the season as starters becomes a backup or on the short side of a platoon. They have an opportunity to make the case it should be the other guy. I have belief that Jarred Kelenic can figure it out, and he can be as consistent as we've seen when he is on. Again, in the month of June, he batted .304 with a 900 OPS. 6 homers, 14 RBI. It was the best stretch of his month, or of his season for Atlanta. Can he find that form again and make the case he needs to be the starter in left field or the strong side of the platoon? We'll see. We're not giving up on Jarred Kelenic. We're just acknowledging a World Series contending team cannot afford to have a guy that bats .231 for the entire season when you're already dealing with a black hole at shortstop in Orlando Arcia. That was another question. If Michael Harris and the infield are back to their 2023 numbers, is left field still a bigger need than shortstop? And I don't really think it is. The issue you have is it's so much easier to upgrade at a corner outfield spot than it is at shortstop. There are just so few options on the market that can play shortstop and can give you something offensively. Willy Adames is the only kind of sure thing there. And outside of that, who, qualifying offer, by the way, outside of that, it's Ha-Seong Kim, who won't be ready to start the year because of shoulder surgery. We also don't know what his arm strength's going to do after the surgery. His arm strength may not come back. Ozzie had this issue. Part of the reason he ended up giving up shortstop to Dansby and moving to second. There's just no certainty at shortstop outside of Willy Adames, and he's going to cost a ton of money. So it is, I'd argue shortstop's still a bigger need than left field, but it's significantly easier to fill left field than it is to shortstop. And honestly, I want the Braves to go ahead and draft a shortstop high already. I want a hotshot prep shortstop. I want a college kid. Caleb Bonham would have been a great pick to me in the second round, something like that. I want the Braves to invest in the shortstop position outside of an international free agent who's 16 years old. But I don't do these drafts. Renit Shaw does, and we're just not quite there yet as an organization to do that. Another question here. Aussie fan 755, big supporter of the Substack. Love you, buddy. Thank you. What are the odds Atlanta brings back Charlie Morton? At $20 million to zero. He's not coming back for $20 million. I do think there are two different calculuses here, two different odds based on the offseason plan. If you're spending that $60 million that you freed up and getting payroll back to what it was last year, just shy of the third luxury tax tier, then at best it's a 10% odds that Charlie Morton comes back. Maybe you swing big on a starting pitcher, which looks like it's harder now that Blake Snell's off the market. Everybody else has a qualifying offer, or they're a second-tier guy like a Nathan Eovaldi. Maybe you bring back Charlie Morton as veteran depth at $8 million or something like that. If it's a normal offseason, I've got it at 10% at best, and that feels high. If you're doing the winter of austerity that we talked about, where you're trying to spend no more than $20 million, save a couple million for in the season for the trade deadline, and reset the CBT, I think your odds are a lot better of bringing back Charlie Morton on a $5 or $8 million deal to give you some innings out of the rotation because you're losing so much. So it all depends on the direction this winter, and we're not really going to know what the direction is this winter until we start seeing this team make some acquisitions, right? Had a question about that, by the way. Do I expect our big move, because this team makes a big move or two every offseason, do I expect our big move to happen before the end of the winter meetings? And this came from somebody, I believe, who I was expected to see at the winter meetings. Turns out I actually can't go. We have a family thing that's going to disrupt that, so I can't go to the winter meetings, unfortunately, this year. Went last year, was a great time. But I would expect if Atlanta makes a move, they're going to make their big move before the winter meetings. Jarred Kelenic was a big move. Ronaldo Lopez was a big move. Chris Sale was a big move. Sale was the end of December. Like, Chris Sale was close to New Year's, I believe, when they made that trade. But Jarred Kelenic, I remember being in my hotel room asleep the night before the winter meeting started in Nashville. And my roommate woke me up to say, hey, the Braves just traded for Jarred Kelenic. You need to write about this? I was like, dang it. Yeah, I do. I woke up and wrote about it. Ronaldo Lopez was signed November 20th. So if the Braves are going to make a big move, I predict they will make whatever their big move is this offseason before the winter meetings. The caveat here, if it's an austerity winter, It's probably not going to actually be a big move. It's going to be something smaller, and we just don't realize that was the big move in retrospect. So, clarification there. Drew Hackenberg versus Lucas Braun. Who is more likely to get called up and stay in the majors next season? Quick caveat here. What Spencer Schwellenbach did is not normal. People have to understand you can't just call a pitcher up from Double-A and this dude's going to work out. That's not typically how it works. He's special. But if it's one of these two, I'm going to say Drew Hackenberg. I like Lucas Braun. Don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of Lucas Braun. He's got really good command. I like his fastball up in the zone. He doesn't miss a lot. He throws like 70% strikes with that fastball up in the zone. He's got a sweeper, a curveball, a changeup that he plays off of that. But I just really Drew Hackenberg. I think he's the platonic ideal of a sinker slider guy, right? He's got the sinker. His slider's more of a slurve. He has a cutter with it. He added a four-seamer last year when he got in the organization. So he can both get the ground ball to weak contact. He can also get swings and misses. Like Bryce Elder has been trying to add that for a year and a half now and hasn't really been able to miss the bats as consistently as he needs to when the ground balls aren't working. Drew Hackenberg can do that. So if it's one of these two, give me the guy that throws 5 pitches that can reliably get weak contact but has the ability to generate swing and miss. I think he has a lot of similarities to Schwellenbach. I probably should dive into that in a newsletter piece, so I'll look to doing that this winter. A couple other rapid fires here. Who leads off to start the season? It's Michael Harris. Michael Harris II is going to be your leadoff hitter on opening day. The big question to me, when Ronald comes back, he's likely to take over that spot again because he likes batting leadoff. Snit defers to the veterans, whatever. The big question to me is going to be when Ronald comes back, does Michael Harris move to second and Ozzie Albies drop down the order? Because Ozzie's not really as much of an on-base guy as a typical number 2 hitter should be. Ozzie's on-base for his career is 322. Last year, it was 303. It was better in 2023. Everything was better. It was 336 then. But in 22, it was 294. In 21, it was 310. In 2020, it was 306. Ozzie's not an on-base guy like you typically see in the number 2 hole. I think Harris would do better, both from a speed perspective. He's also not an on-base guy. He does not walk hardly at all, which is the big weakness of Michael Harris. But I like him better, offensive potential, speed, and stealing ability behind Ronald than I do Ozzie. We'll see what happens. I predict they're going to end up pushing Michael Harris back down in deference to the 2 veterans up there, but we'll see what happens. Thoughts on Joey Gallo for the outfield? I'm out on Joey Gallo. It's telling when the dude can't hit 200 in the majors. He hasn't hit 200 in a season since 95 games with Texas in 21, where he hit 223. Last year, he hit 10 homers in 76 games with the Nationals and batted 161. There is zero reason. I would rather have David Peralta, 37-year-old David Peralta, on a 1-year deal for the outfield under an austerity winter than I would Joey Gallo. Yeah, it's great that Joey Gallo can play first base as well. Awesome. You don't need that in Atlanta. Matt Olson literally has not missed a game since being traded to Atlanta. I'm out on Joey Gallo. Maybe you give him a minor league deal, and if he can catch fire in the minors, but I don't even want him to sign a major league deal with the team. I'm out. And another one here, which minor league contract that we added do you like the most? For me, it is Enoli Paredes, I think, is the big one here. 166 ERA in 21 2/3 innings last year for the Brewers and the Cubs. Strikeout rate wasn't great. Walk rate was a little too high. But in the minors, those numbers were amazing. 38% strikeout rate in the minors. His 4-seamer gets a 66% ground ball rate. He threw 212 of them in the minors and got a ground ball rate of 66.7%. I legitimately think Enoli Paredes can be a major league reliever on opening day. This morning, we dropped a roster projection on the Substack, the opening day roster projection, and I've got him in the bullpen right now. That is my favorite ad. If you look at the position players, I guess it's Charles LeBlanc. He can't play shortstop. He's like Luke Williams but he can't play shortstop. But in AAA last year, 16% walk rate, 21% chase, which is pretty low. His 90 percentile exit velocity is not great, 101 and change. Again, MLB average is 103, so below average power, but better contact ability, better on base. This is a trend you've seen from a lot of these depth signings for Atlanta this year, like your Nick Allen, a little bit from your Carlos Rodriguez, is guys that are higher contact, can get on base, but don't have a ton of power. I like that switch for Atlanta. If you're missing Ozzy Albies, right? Give me a guy that can reliably get on base and let me count on Matt Olson and Austin Riley and Michael Harris and Ronald Acuna Jr. and the power guys to keep hitting for power. Don't ask a backup to come in and slug. Just give me a dude who can get on base, give us an opportunity to test the defense, try to drive them in, or whatever. So I like that addition, and I guess it's Charles LeBlanc from the guys we've signed so far. I'm just still not really huge on his ability to contribute. I don't think they go to him as the everyday second baseman if Ozzy gets hurt, right? He can't play short. He hasn't played short since, I think, 2021. Third base, a little bit of corner outfield. He feels like Luke Williams that can't play short, and I'd probably just rather have Luke Williams, but I guess he's my favorite of those groups. Okay, reminder, there is no show on Thanksgiving. We are back on Friday. We're going to look at those off-season plans. If you have an austerity winter, what might that look like from a talent acquisition perspective? If you're spending $60 million in free agency this winter, what might that look like? We're going to break both of those down. We'll see you next time on Braves Today.